Hey everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday One Thing for this week. My name is Hamza, and I'm joined by my co-host Maury Rubin. How's it going, Maury?
I'm doing great. It's another live Wednesday one thing, which is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. It's a trend we started last week, and super glad to continue it into this week with a new topic, which is a report from Adobe Analytics about the potential size of the e-commerce market going into 2022. Now, Maury, we've spoken a lot about numbers on this podcast over the last 1 year or so. It's just been a year. It's just been that kind of year where numbers have changed and moved way past the any predictions anyone could have made in, say, January 2020 when it comes to e-commerce. Um, and Adobe predicts that next year could actually be the first trillion-dollar year for e-commerce in the US because of the way the pandemic's changed, the way it's changed how consumers shop. Actually, while compiling its report for the 2020 Digital Economy Index, the firm analyzed data to show how online shopping increased in the country from March of last year through to Feb of 2021, so just up till a few days ago. So over the course of the last year, consumers in the US spent a total of 844 billion online during the pandemic. And online shopping saw a huge boost of $183 billion. That additional 183 billion was nearly the size of the last holiday shopping season, when US shoppers spent 188 billion between November and December of last year. So at current growth rates, Adobe expects the 2021 calendar year to bring in somewhere between 850 to 930 billion, so very close to the trillion-dollar mark. And in 2022, the company expects to be the first. The company expects 2022 to be the first trillion-dollar year for e-commerce in these United States. So far in the first 2 months of 21, U.S. consumers have spent 121 billion online, which represents a 34% growth year on year. 34% is obviously a pretty ridiculous number for Jan and Feb. It's not shopping season as far as I can remember. But Maury, we'd just love to break this down a little bit with you and discuss some of the whys as to why, not so much of why we've gotten here, but why it's likely to stay. So shoot me your thoughts.
Wow, that's you gave a lot of things to think about. Definitely a lot of numbers coming at me, but I think just what I've seen out in the market and what we've experienced on a day-to-day basis over the last year is that one, people are now finally coming to realize that online shopping is here to stay. That is baseline standard. Everyone now can make an online purchase. So it's the normalization of online purchasing. Is that going to go away? No, it's way more convenient. People have come to understand that. The second thing that I think is really interesting about why we're in this situation and why certainly this isn't going to go away is something that we found out last year, which was buy now, pay later. So if you saw a firm went public, you have companies like Klarna, all these different buy now, pay later solutions. So Shopify has a firm integrated. And basically that's a way nicer way to shop online, which is you can split your purchase over four. So that behavior has been normalized. And on the flip side, you can do that in store too. A lot of people will offer consumer financing like that, but certainly now we know we can do it online. The last two things here are that even if you do shop online, the normalization of curbside pickup is something that will stay around. So even if you do want to go pick up something in store, the fact that online stores will allow you to pick it up from curbside, that will allow smaller companies, smaller businesses in the economy to also jump on that online trend. You shop from the convenience of your house, pick it up right outside. And I think the last thing here that we've seen with some successful e-commerce companies is just the fact that they've had now a year, an entire year to establish that brand loyalty. If you started even on March 1st, 2020, and rode the wave up until now, you could have jumped on TikTok, you could have made an Instagram page, you could have had reward points through your store. You've had so much time to build up clout within your business that going forward, you're not just going to throw that away. You're going to keep on the trend. So those are really the four things that I've seen that are going to make a big impact for online sellers in 2021.
Yeah, great points there. I think something Michelle's been telling us here at Clearbanc since, pretty much since my first day here a couple of years ago, is the fact that people buying online will be just so the penetration rate of e-commerce is, it's just absolutely shooting through the roof. And these are trends that have accelerated rather than just popped up out of nowhere, right? E-commerce was always going to become a little bit more common and more normalized, except it's all happened so fast. And that's maybe why 2022 is going to end up being the first $1 trillion year, whereas previously, say back in 2019, analysts might have predicted that to still be a few years away. And to speak to buy now, pay later, absolutely. I would say that's probably for me that's probably been the biggest change that maybe people haven't talked about as much. I mean, PayPal as well. I remember they launched a pretty unique buy now, pay later product towards the end of 2020, I believe. So there's been a lot of innovation in the market, right? There's been a lot of changes to how people are allowed to buy stuff. And yeah, I think absolutely that 1 year of brand loyalty cultivation will certainly make a difference in pretty much every company. Either now sells online or they are in the process of launching their online platforms, right? So there's no company that's not looking to have a digital presence. You either have one, or you are a digitally native brand, or you're a brand that's never been online but are now looking at ways to expand and move into e-commerce as well. So yeah, I think that sets up the next 18 months or so pretty nicely.
Well, what I think is also interesting is when they talk about these trends in obviously online retail, what else are they incorporating into that? Because if you look at everyone else who is joining the online trends, last week we spoke about social influencer. Now you could really expand what an online retailer is to really anything. So this lift in online stores is not just with the physical products. I think it'd be interesting in this report if they also include things like online services. This push towards online is really lifting all boats, especially for any kind of entrepreneur, whether you want to sell a physical product or an online service. Did they mention that in the report? Is that part of how they think about it?
No, that wasn't what the crux of the report was, but yeah, that would be a very interesting analysis there on as well to get a good sense of that. And something you said about rising tide lifting all boats. I mean, that's something we've been seeing with shopping holidays, for example, for a while, right? I mean, yes, Amazon was the most not the biggest winner, but you know what I mean. Like Amazon sort of emerged as being synonymous with online shopping, especially during the pandemic, especially during the first 2, 3, 4 months of the pandemic when FBA was so critical to so many different things. And something we've seen with Amazon before, for example, with Prime Day going all the way back to 2019, is although Prime Day was Amazon's self-created shopping holiday, so you could go on and shop on Amazon, it actually led to increased online sales across the digital commerce space, right? Like even individual brands, websites, non-Amazon Prime sellers, on Amazon sellers, on the Amazon seller platform, all these merchants and businesses and brands also saw an increase in their sales just because Prime Day made more people look online. And then, if they weren't necessarily buying it on Prime, they just went and bought it from someplace else, and there were good deals to be had, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that focus has, affected how Shopify brands or BigCommerce brands are operating just as much.
Well, yeah, you sort of hit the nail on the head there, and it speaks to the normalization of online shopping. And now that we do have essentially 1 year of data, I mean, it's weird. This is really the 1 year anniversary of this whole COVID pandemic lockdown. And really, I think everyone has seen that, and we'll link to it later, the chart of the 10 years of growth in essentially a few months' time. Well, now we're at the end of the year. I think we can look back and say what happened. And I'm actually curious, and even to know what you think about how repeatable that giant growth is. Definitely when you look at, Amazon and Shopify, they're reporting, like, they're just saying, like, we will not have the same kind of growth next year in terms of merchant adoption, because, that's a huge lift within the first few months of people jumping online. I'm actually very curious, now that we have a year in the books, what is going to happen next year? What are we going to see in terms of growth of new businesses? Because it's such a black swan event for this to have happened, where everyone was just going to jump online and spin up a new Shopify store. Certainly, it's been very beneficial. All the physical stores now have an online store. That can't happen again. You already have the first store. You're not going to create another Amazon store. So I am curious, with the trends we've seen with new business creation, physical stores coming online, what the next year has in terms of this digital adoption.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, like I think that's, if you had a crystal ball, like what do you think you'd see in the next year for this kind of growth?
Yeah, I just would not want to take a bet on predicting any sort of numbers, just because it's
Hamza, we didn't even do a numbers round. Come on, you gotta help me
I
out
would
with some prediction.
never do a numbers round. But I think what I would be really curious to know on my, and I haven't been able to gather the necessary data set to be able to, come up with my own analysis for this yet. But I'd love to know the founders who started their businesses in the past 12 months, without necessarily having an intention to, make that their main thing or make online sales their main avenue of personal income or business income, but are now thinking of making that their primary focus, right? So say companies that were primarily wholesale sort of started selling more online, or primarily brick and mortar, so, started more online, but a year in have now decided that they want to focus and pivot to that online platform. So they might not necessarily be new merchants hopping onto Amazon or Shopify or the like, but they will be merchants moving more of their revenue onto these platforms. So that impacts those platforms in different ways as well. So yeah, I mean, I speak to founders every day, but unfortunately, I think I'd have to speak to hundreds of founders every day to be able to come up with my own analysis on this. So I'll probably wait for Adobe to come up with their next big drop and maybe do a Wednesday one thing on that topic with you
Come on,
as well.
Hamza. That's upsetting. I was really hoping you'd have a better prediction for me, but I think the big number here, and because now I'm just on the report. So last year, so I guess they're talking about like January 1st till the end of December, consumers in the US spent a total of $844 billion online, right?
Yep.
So that's why they're pegging this year to be $1 trillion, which really just means like the biggest lift from last year was just everyone jumping online. Now what Adobe's saying is they have to capitalize by continuously using e-commerce as a platform. So they're expecting another 200 billion just from that. I wonder if Adobe is just shortchanging themselves. Like I wonder if it's going to be bigger. And what's even more shocking is like the US, by all accounts, is sort of behind the world in e-commerce. Like, of course, China's the biggest, and they're gonna hit $1 trillion in the US. Man, yeah. China must have just exploded in terms of e-commerce. So like they must have always been like sort of doing more than $1 trillion, but they must have been doing like multiples of that. What's really interesting is I think it's just 844 billion alone, tracking to $1 trillion this year. I think I honestly, like my prediction, if you're not going to be as so bold as to make a prediction, my bold prediction is going to be more than 1 trillion. I think, again, everything we've talked about of why e-commerce is here to stay, I think people are just being more creative. I think they are going to incorporate more of these, not just physical product sales, but any commerce that's done online. So think about all the things with influencers, think about look at NFTs. That has to be
you were going to say
e-commerce. I mean, look, that's millions of dollars overnight, and that's going to keep going. Like we had people sell $69 million worth of art in one shot. Like there are all these new products that are coming along, and what can happen in the course of 1 year? So much. So my bold prediction, and you can mark it here, that we're going to see more than $1 trillion worth of online sales in the US. My bold prediction, because Hamza, you're not bold enough to make the prediction. So you heard it here first, guys, on the One Day One thing.
I'll say this. I think Adobe's prediction of 900 billion or so for 2021 sounds fair. And their prediction for the 2022 being the first $1 trillion year also sounds fair. I wouldn't expect them to cross the $1 trillion mark this year. If they do, that would be great for all of us,
wow.
Especially. So
all right, mark it in the books.
Actually,
we have the bull case and the bear case. Hamza, you're taking the under, it seems. I'm a gambling man. I'm definitely smashing the over. But it'll be fun to look back next year and see where we're at.
Yeah, well, that's as great a point as to wrap up this Wednesday. One thing, would love to hear from people listening and tuning in what their predictions are. Whether they think Adobe's $1 trillion prediction for 2022 is a little conservative, and if they're on Maury's team and think this is it, this is the year that's going to happen, or if they find themselves agreeing with Adobe and also with yours truly.
don't put the viewer in the hot seat. They're obviously going to choose Team Maury, their favorite host of Wednesday One Thing. But I think it's a fair choice. Definitely let us know what you think. Over or under 1 trillion in U.S. sales, and we'll take a look at that and comment below.
Gotcha. Well, Maury, a pleasure as ever being live here with you, and looking forward to taking over the Wednesday One Thing next week as well.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Cheers.